what's going on, guys? So today we're talking about the best-selling cards under $5 or less. This is the Yu-Gi-Oh! Penny Stock Market Watch. A new challenger has entered the arena. Ice Shade, Gamir. I actually haven't read this card. Once per turn, quick effect, you can activate face-up monsters. You can activate this effect. Face-up monsters you control cannot be destroyed or banished by your opponent's card effects this turn. Then, if you activated this in response to your opponent's card or effect, and your opponent has a card or a name, that card on the field and or graveyard, you can banish it. If a card is banished by your opponent's effect, if a card is banished by your opponent's card effect while it's in your graveyard, you can special summon this back out. This is a 3,000 attack level 10 synchro monster. Requires a water tuner and a non-water. I don't know how easy. I don't know what Ice Shades look like as a deck. I don't know if, honestly, like I know I looked at the archetype a while ago. And like I haven't read Ice Shade Manifestation. Honestly, like Photon Hypernova came and went. I didn't even realize this archetype got support. I thought that this was just going to be another archetype that seemed like it might be okay, and then just kind of fell by the wayside. I mean, this was interesting when it came out in Burst of Destiny as far as value was concerned, and then immediately got this Megaton reprint and it just completely bodied the price. This feels like a super budget archetype. Everything is aqua as well, which means this is a really high level tuner. That means that these cards can be sent for cost of Totally Awesome's effect. You know how usually in Sprite, Totally Awesome will just send itself, or like the Dupe Frog. That's because it requires you just send an Aqua. I don't know if you probably already knew that interaction, if you know anything about Ice Shades, because you probably can run Toad in this deck. I don't know how you make it from what I just saw, but okay, it's just Bahamut Shark. Yeah, okay. But yeah, there's a lot of really good support for water, for aqua, so I'd assume an Ice Jade deck is okay. Let's actually take a look to see what Ice Jade deck looks like on eBay. Because I haven't mentioned this in a while, but I always like to get my Yu-Gi-Oh cores from eBay, or like a website that specifically says it has Yu-Gi-Oh cores. I can't think of the ones I usually use right now. I know MCO40 likes to run sort of like advertisement campaigns with them, but it's just a lot harder to get the full core on TCG. You have to get kind of lucky that one seller just conveniently has 3 copies of every card that you're looking for in an archetype, or you can just go to eBay, and it might be a little bit more expensive to go for eBay, right? Because let's say, I mean, most of these cards were like 5 cents on TCG Player, like 25 cents, right? So $40 for a full set realistically isn't like the best, but the fact is you're going to get the full core. I'd assume shipping is free, free 2 to 4 day shipping, right? And TCG Player, and I've made a video about this before, has had issues with sellers not sending cards and different things like that, especially for a card like this, where let's say you bought it back in March, or let's say you bought it, obviously not back in March, but let's say you bought it like 2 weeks ago, or maybe like you bought it here, and then all of a sudden it got to here the next week. That's when the seller might do something of like, oh, we ran out of inventory, but they actually didn't run out of inventory. They just took the cheap ones down, and they're about to put the more expensive ones back up. As far as whether or not this is a good card to buy, I don't think so. I don't really know. Here, we kind of want to do this as well, because this card isn't just, it's not technically just an ice barrier, or excuse me, an ice jade card, but it's actually also, it's relatively speaking generic. I mean, you do have the restriction of requiring a water tuner, but there's actually a decent amount of those. Yeah. Wow, is it really 51? Coral Dragon. That is interesting. I did not think of that. Coral Dragon can be used to make this card. That is actually kind of insane that you could do Coral Dragon things. Ice Barriers. Crystron probably is the best deck that can use that card, including Ice Jade. The Fishborg stuff, obviously. Ghost Sister is randomly a tuner. That's fun. Yeah, that's kind of, I mean, obviously Ice Jade itself, as well. Penguin stuff. It started well, but now it's kind of going by the wayside. Whatever this Sarctic archetype is. So, but the Coral Dragon thing is interesting, for me at least. I don't really know what deck is able to make Coral Dragon and runs generic level 4 monsters, or a non-tuner level 4 monster, but this effect is pretty solid. I guess it could be Awakening the Dragon target as well. I didn't even think of that. I don't think it could special summon. It might actually still be able to special summon it out, even if it's not properly summoned. But it's a pretty decent card. 3,000 attack, banishes an opponent's card. So I would say if you're able to get this for under 5, it looks like it's about to head over 5. It might not. I would take your money and run, though. Like, you saw what happened when they got to 586. It immediately shot back down to 398. So if you are able to get this card for under $5 and you see that you could sell it quickly for over 5, I wouldn't like sit too long. I don't think that card is going to hit like $10 or anything like that. Ooh, this card. It's been a minute since we looked at this card. I mean, literally, Terraforming is at 1. Metaverse? I think they changed. I think Metaverse is back, right? But no one, if it is, no one ever plays it. And this card is probably a big reason why. You know, the fact that, 1, you could mill it. You know, it's not just tier elements that likes to mill, right? But 2, obviously, Foolish Burial Goods is still at 3. Foolish Burial Goods now has, like, if you run a field spell in your deck, like, and if you have the space, obviously, there's no reason not to run like 3 copies of Foolish Burial Goods, and like a Metaphos Fusion and this card, right? Because that means that almost every single one of your Foolish Burial Goods, if you see all 3, will have value. Obviously, the first one's going to get to this card, and then the next 2 are going to play Metaphos Fusion, and then if you draw this card, you play, obviously, the Metaphos, you obviously send the Metaphos Fusion down, and get the free draw. Or even if you just want to play 3 Foolish Burial Goods just for 1 copy of this card, because it is a once per duel effect. Now, obviously, you have to run the Crystal Beast monster, which is tricky, but it's not as tricky as it may seem. Like, there's not really any like amazingly generic Crystal Beast monster that comes to mind. Pegasus has the most attack. The little turtle has the most defense. Topaz actually technically has the most attack, the tiger, but that's only when it attacks. So there's not like a lot of great ones that you could run, but in an archetype that can support it, you might as well. It gets you free access to the field spell. Obviously, you know, tier elements is the main deck that can use this, and obviously as well Crystal Beast, right? And that's the thing, like, when you see a card like this, it gets used in other decks, so you just assume like it's an insane card. Like I always use the example of Brilliant Fusion. Brilliant Fusion was an insanely powerful card in a lot of decks, but it was the most powerful in Gem Knights. Right, I had to think for a second what archetype that card is actually for. It's like Predaplant Veritarian Anaconda, for example. It's actually not that good of a card in Predaplants. Like Predaplants can run it because it's a generic fusion, summon, but it's actually not that great for the archetype itself. And we see a lot of times generic archetype support cards are like that, right? But when we see a card like this, if there are 2 or more monsters with different types among the level 10 or higher monsters on the field, shuffle all cards except this one from both players' hands, fields, and graveyards in the deck, and then each player draws 5. It's actually a really good card, just in general, for Crystal Beast. So I don't think this is a bad buy. This isn't probably the best time to get this card, with it looking like it's about a $2 card now. There's probably some degenerate combo that I'm unaware of that this card pulls off. You like to have gotten it back here. It might be a little bit the ship has sailed, but if you can get it for under $2, I would definitely pull the trigger on this, because it is a really good card. It's honestly more generic than it seems. Like I know, like running a Crystal Beast seems like the worst thing ever, but it's not that bad for free terraforming, right? Big Welcome Labyrinth is here. This has just taken an absolute nosedive, and is now we're entering that conversation of, is the Labyrinth deck budget? Because it wasn't really super expensive. Like I know it was like relatively expensive. I mean, Lady is 14. Ariana is 10. Lovely is $2. Ariane is 70 cents. Honestly, you could get a full collector's rare deck for really not that bad for collector's rares. The thing is, trap decks are just, it's tough. Like there's 2 main reasons why we've seen trap decks fall by the wayside, at least in my opinion. One, it feels like the obvious thing of like there are just more board wipes, more negations. It's just hard, right? It's hard for this deck to go second, because you really do have to build it. Like I mean, it can go second if you know you're going second, but when you lose a die roll and you're going second, it really hurts for this deck. But the biggest thing with a trap type deck, especially one like this, its play style is enhanced by individuals who know the game very, very well, right? Especially to get, to actually see play at a high level, you really need to know what you're doing with Labyrinth. But not just what you're doing with Labyrinth, but what you're doing with Labyrinth against Kashtira, what you're doing with Labyrinth against Trap Trick, what you're doing with Labyrinth against the Mirror, against Branded, against Sprite, against Runic. So I think that's why we see this deck's play go down a lot. And it kind of has made the deck a little more budget. I mean, you can literally get, these are Korean, but you can literally get big welcomes for $3, which honestly doesn't really feel that bad. I don't know, though, if I would necessarily buy just parts of this deck. It feels like a really good deck just to have a full core of, to where eventually you could trade it for some like bigger cards. But it probably would be better just to buy the cards individually. So, this is interesting. A couple of these are very interesting for me. So we'll do this. Cyframe Gear Gamma too, honestly, because we haven't seen this card in a while. It is just, I actually don't like the card personally. I think it's I think it's relatively speaking bad. Well, I guess I said this on Twitter one time, Yu-Gi-Oh Twitter, like Cyframe Gear Gamma is not a bad card, but Cyframe Driver is such a terrible card. I know it's got 2500 attack, but just being a level 6 monster that doesn't do anything is just so bad. And also what I don't like about Gamma too, you really can only activate them once a duel, right? Because once they get banished, it's gone. So I don't like Cypher Gear Gamma, but I honestly might even be in the minority. Like, I constantly see this card in the top 25 best-selling cards. It doesn't really fluctuate too much to where you can gain an insane amount of value. But if you're able to get this card right now for like $3, $3.25, like there's not really a lot, like $3.50 even, you're probably going to be in a spot to where you could sell it for $4 or $5, or maybe even wait, because it's not great this format, but it's okay. And you know, when Maxi, if Maxi ever comes back, this card counters it really, really well. So, you know, just keep that in mind as well. So this card will go up in value if Maxi ever comes back. Now, when we take a look at a card like that, like Cross Sheep, Cross Sheep has 2 printings, 3 printings. Interesting. And the interesting thing as well, I believe the Ignition Assault was the first one, right? It first came out as rare. I'm not sure. I don't have the order of all the sets memorized, but when I look at this, they're all very, very close in price. So when we see, they're all very close in the listing amount. I know one is 50, one is 53, and one is 64, right? Even though the one that's 64 is the one that got us here because it's one of the best-selling versions. But then you also have to take a look at what the listings are actually saying, right? So, you know, this one is Lumina has 30 for 245. 30 is kind of a lot. Whereas this one, it is actually a little bit cheaper, but there are less versions of this card available. We do come all the way over here. Lumina once again. That's wild. Has 36 at I think 325. So just Lumina by themselves is kind of controlling, could be potentially controlling what the market is on this. See if we can find Lumina here as well. This one has a lot less versions available. 7, 5, yeah. So this one looks like it's the most scarce. But supply and demand doesn't necessarily mean that whichever version has the least amount available is the best buy. So, because it's like I always say, like, you're never going to be able to sell a card for what you think you should be able to get for it. You can only sell a card for what someone else is willing to pay for it, right? So, at the end of the day, when we see a card like Cross Sheep, first off, it's fantastic. Its ritual effect is insane. Its fusion effect is insane. Its Xyz's Secret effect leave a lot to be desired, but it is a relatively generic Link 2 monster that's just great support for both ritual and fusion-based decks. And you would want to pick up a copy of these just in the off chance that something absolutely insane. Like, it is definitely a card that has potential, like Summon Sorceress type potential to be just like, or Krishan Hucklefibrax potential, just be absolutely insane. Just because this card has been out for I think 3 to 4 years now, I think 4 years is how long this card has been out, doesn't mean that it can't randomly find something that makes it go boom, go crazy, right? So when it comes down to it, which version of Cross Sheep do I think it's the best? I honestly think all versions of Cross Sheep are great buys. I would like to lean towards the side of Ignition Assault, except for the simple fact that the rarities for me is what brings it over the top. I think people are deciding, like, yes, we know that maybe the 2021 Tins has more versions available, so maybe it's a worse buy, but it looks nicer, right? So as far as a penny stock is concerned, I think as time goes on, eventually that version is going to start to pull away from the other 2 versions. But I think all versions of Cross Sheep are very good. I wouldn't pay $3 for any of them right now. But it could be a situation where one of these are worth $5 or all of them. Like 3 is not a lot, and I don't really see it getting a reprint anytime soon. Like 3 is a really good number for this card, as far as the amount of reprints are concerned. So I don't really see it changing, but stranger things have happened. Volcanic Rocket. So this is the Speed Duel GX version, and Volcanics just got a bunch of support, or it just got announced they got a bunch of support, and this card is obviously a super necessary card for them. And when we look at the 3 commons, the dual terminal obviously version is the most expensive version, and then when we look at the non-commons, we do have this gold series from 2009, which is 665 figured. 665. So the only penny stock non-common Volcanic Rocket is the Speed Duel GX Dual Academy box version, and I would get these copies relatively fast. Like I think that these are going to continue to go up. I don't think we've seen the market for it. It's crazy. This was $2 a month ago. And now it is about $5. I think it will cross the $5 mark, not just because of the volcanic support, not just because every non-common version of Volcanic Rocket is over $5, but because actually, like, speed duels, as weird as it sounds, we talked about it a little bit last week. I don't remember which Marker Watch it was, where, like, if you want to play a speed duel card like this in a non-speed duel deck, you can. But if you want to play a different Volcanic Rocket in speed duels, you cannot, unless it says, like, you have to have specific cards that are designed for speed duels. And yes, I had to double check, but I was pretty confident that this was the first time that Volcanic Rocket was being brought to speed duels. So I would even keep your eye out on this one. But everybody in the box gets at least one. But if this starts to go way up in price, this one might start going up a little bit in price just out of necessity, because like I said, speed duels might not seem like a popular format, and it's not. But those that play it have to play certain cards. So I think this is probably the best buy that we talked about today. But like I always say, I try to mention at least once, spend your money how you feel. Don't go crazy spending just based off of what someone on, a random computer screen told you to do, right? As far as Appaloosa is concerned, Appaloosa is just a generic, really great Link 4 monster. This Magnificent Mavens rare, I really, really like the look of. What I also really like, too, is it's the alternate art version. I thought there was another one, though. I don't know what happened here. I can't spell Appaloosa. It's 1P this whole time. So this one, okay, so this is, I think we see now why this card is going up in value, because all versions of Appaloosa are over $5, right? So this is another fantastic buy if you can get it for less than $5. If not, I could very well see this being the cheap Appaloosa version, so I wouldn't go crazy spending, assuming that this is going to hit like $10 or $15. But similar to Cross Sheep, I don't see this card getting a reprint anytime soon. And so with that, I think that this could be a very solid buy. I just wouldn't go too crazy on it, that type of thing. But let me know what you guys think. What are the best selling cards under $5 or less that you like? Let me know in those comments down below. Make sure you guys click that like button, show your support for the channel, subscribe for even more content. Most importantly of all, have a good day.